Welcome back. What is a wicked problem, or what are wicked problems? In this video, I'm going to give you a model which kind of puts a bit of structure on them. I'll explain what they kind of look like, what they're similar to in regular life. I'll give you a clear definition and an explanation of what they actually are. I'll outline some of the studies that have gone on in the past, exploring what wicked problems mean for people in different contexts. And then I'll actually outline some of the occurrences of wicked problems in the world. So, wicked problems are either complex or chaotic. A complex wicked problem is something where we can see most of what's going on. We understand the boundaries of the problem, but it nevertheless is a complex thing to solve. A great example of a complex wicked problem is the issues that we all see with supply chain management worldwide at the moment. So we either don't have enough pallets somewhere, we don't have enough containers somewhere, we have a problem with supplying computer chips, we have a problem with moving cars around. In Australia, where I live, it's very difficult to get a car just at the moment. In other words, we understand what the problem is and what its main components are, but it still remains complex to actually solve. A chaotic problem, on the other hand, is something where we know a lot of what's going on, we know where a lot of the boundaries are, but it's still nevertheless reasonably uncontrolled. There are things going on that we don't completely understand the interconnectedness between different elements of the problem, and that is what causes the issues with it. Great example of a chaotic wicked problem just at the moment that we all should be aware of is the climate crisis. Now, there's a lot of disputes around its causes. Some people say that it's not human caused. That's not necessarily something I agree with. Other people say that it's just naturally occurring. It doesn't really matter what the causes are. What does matter is that we do something about it and we try and get a handle on it. The difficulty is there are so many different moving parts within climate. It's actually difficult to really get a handle on exactly how we can get to task. So we've got to break it down a little bit. So the climate crisis is a genuinely chaotic wicked problem. What's something that's very similar to a wicked problem? Well, it's kind of a bit of an unfortunate metaphor in some respects, but it's kind of like a psychiatric disorder. In other words, the problem is occurring and we can see that it's going on, but how you actually treat it is really very difficult indeed, because there are so many elements within psychiatric disorders that it really causes us great issues actually getting to grips and understanding what is going on, because there are so many moving parts within a psychiatric disorder, and many of the things that are going on are actually hidden from us. So the metaphor is quite appropriate in that it's complex. There's a lot of complex, what we call etiology, a lot of complex causes, and there's lots of different factors involved, and the solution to it is not really very simple. So, if wicked problems are disorderly, which is what I'm basically saying, either complex or chaotic, how do we actually explain that? What does that actually mean? Well, to start with, it's very difficult to formulate a wicked problem. It's very difficult to actually describe it easily. If you think again, go back to the two examples I've used, the supply chain problem is difficult to describe succinctly. The climate crisis, goodness knows, is really difficult to describe easily. They are not easy to stop. They don't halt. These sorts of problems don't really stop until they either run out of fuel or something causes them to stop. So it's what we say, there's no stopping rule on a wicked problem. Solutions are not true or false. They're actually good or bad. They're not really solutions. I was reminded by a colleague of mine recently, in fact, when I started this piece of work, that you can't actually solve a wicked problem. You can only actually tame them. You actually temporarily hold them. And your solutions that you put in place may well need to evolve. They may not work. So it's not a once and forget issue in the way that you handle a wicked problem. Now, relating to that, there's no immediate or ultimate test of how successful a solution is. Like I said, you're only taming the problem. Wicked problems tend to evolve unless we get a really good handle on them. Every solution is a one shot. In a way, there's no test and see what works, although that tends to go against the sort of approach that I take. But what you tend to get with them is that you get one shot. You have to try that solution. If it doesn't work, then you need to try another solution, or you need to evolve the solution that you've actually got. In other words, every attempt counts significantly. There's not necessarily a finite set of solutions to a wicked problem. Like I say, you can only tame them. There might be all sorts of approaches that you can actually take to actually getting to grips with these types of problems. Think about it, the way that we're looking to deal with the climate crisis is there are all sorts of things that we need to look at. We need to look at carbon emissions. We need to look at whether or not we can get different forms of power to power the world. We need to look at whether or not we can affect how cattle produce methane or any other livestock produces methane. We need to look at forestry. There's lots of different elements within that solution. So it's very difficult to put together to actually say that there's a definitive set of things that we can actually do. The other characteristic of wicked problems is that they're essentially unique. Although they may look similar to events that have happened previously, there'll be some characteristic about a wicked problem that you're dealing with that you haven't necessarily seen before. They might also be considered to be a symptom of another problem. So there is a lot of interconnectedness between different problem sets. So for example, the problem of pollution in the world, that's a wicked problem because of the amount of carbon we're putting out. That is linked to global warming, which is another problem. It's also linked to the acidification of the oceans, which is another problem. In the case of business, if we look at supply chain management, the fact that we can't get computer chips at the moment because there are problems around actually moving the basic components around, as well as some political issues, means that we can't actually manufacture cars, which means there's a shortage of cars. So there's two interrelated problems relating to a particularly wicked problem. How we explain them, how we talk about them, really tends to govern how we're going to approach them. So if we approach a wicked problem emotively, as is the case with the climate crisis, then that can make finding a problem that will actually work extremely difficult. Instead of sticking with database solutions, we tend to get in political solutions, which cause all sorts of issues and tend to get in the way of actually finding a solution or finding a way of taming that particular problem. Finally, the other thing about wicked problems is that whoever's trying to tame them, whoever's trying to get hold of them, may well be regarded as an expert. And in which case, in this day and age, it tends to be that you're not allowed to be wrong. And we see that in the vociferousness, and we see that in the way that there's a huge debate around solving wicked problems relating to the climate crisis and indeed relating to supply chain management and other issues like that. Another wicked problem, for example, is workplace change. Having done a major workplace change project, I can tell you that I had absolutely no right to be doing what I was doing, and what I was doing was fundamentally wrong, and therefore anything I suggested was going to be wrong, even where I was actually right about what it was I was doing. So where has this all come out of? Where's this idea of wicked problems come from? There's lots of references you can go and look up. I guess for me, the place that it came from originally was the work of Herbert Simon, an artificial intelligence pioneer and economist, won the Nobel Prize for Economics. And he came up with the idea of ill-structured problems was his first was the first time that wicked problems were mentioned. Then in the 1970s, Rittel and Weber actually coined the phrase wicked problem. And that's where a lot of the characteristics that I've just highlighted in their work came out of. What they were dealing with was actually town planning. And town planning is a wicked problem because for any of you who've lived in the city, or indeed any town of any size, will know that actually planning how you lay a town out, how you lay the traffic systems out, how you put the housing in place, the retail development, all of that is singularly difficult, especially bearing in mind that it's going to last several generations once you put that plan into place. So those are the two main influences. The person most recently who's done a huge amount of work, and where some of the ideas at the beginning of this video come from, is a guy called David Snowden, who came up with a thing called the Sinafin network, which is used to describe wicked problems, and is where I get the distinction between complex and chaotic wicked problems and the idea of disorder. So there's a whole ecosystem of wicked problems in the world. They exist at the global level, at the level of society, at the level of business. They obviously exist in politics, and they exist at the individual level, which includes in the home as well. At the global level, the major one that we all see is the climate crisis. But if you want a very quick description of the major ones that are faced at the global level, simply look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Those 17 goals describe the 17 major wicked problems that the world faces, and that includes things like the climate crisis. It includes poverty. It includes issues with health. It includes issues with education. At the business level, there's around about 4 families of wicked problems that organisations can face, and that goes to the work of Ian Mitroff and Christine Pearson a few years ago now. And I'm actually going to do a separate video which outlines all of those sets of problems. But within the workplace, as well as those problems I'm going to talk about, there's issues like the major one at the moment is employee disengagement. As much as 80% of employees are disengaged worldwide. There's the perennial favourite, or not, of managers and project managers of change management, which it can be a real issue within organisations. If you've enjoyed the video, please subscribe. If you're interested and want to find out more about where you are in terms of wicked problems and what your work-life environment is like, why not take my quiz? There's a link to that and to other things that you may find of interest just below the video.